everyone, welcome. I'm excited to introduce our speaker today, coming from the Hoover Institute at Stanford via Cornell, where your permanent position is. I'm particularly excited, an undergraduate degree from Cornell University. I didn't know Professor Geddes that well when I was there. I did attend one of his talks at the library with the location, and I believe it was on the gas tax. We were talking even about some engineering principles involved there about undulation for the road and why it's bad for trucks to be stalled on the highways and items like that. But today you're going to be talking about something I think that Professor Jin in particular is interested in, but we have a number of projects going on here at UCI related to pricing, and of course we do a lot of traffic and transportation engineering as well. So the title is Markets for Road Use, Eliminating Traffic Congestion through Scheduling, Routing, and Real-Time Road Pricing. And please join me in welcoming our speaker.
Thanks for the kind introduction. Thanks, Ben Long, for inviting me. Great to be here. Just a footnote, I gave this talk and UU fans group at UC at Davis. My son is taking her class now, finishing up, and he says she's the best teacher he's had all year. But he's only been there 1 year, so that's great. And thanks, Victoria, for your help in organization and logistics. This is great. So just by way of background, I'm not an engineer by training, although I've recently become much more fascinated with engineering and how it can link to solving some of the serious problems we face in surface transportation right now. My background is in economics. I taught at Fordham University in the Bronx in economics for 10 years before moving to Cornell in 2002. So I've been at Cornell for a while. I'm a joint and relatively new 4-year-old Brooks School of Public Policy. Jeb Brooks is the donor who gave us the money to found the school. We have a tremendous dean who's very supportive of this. I have a joint appointment in the economics department, which is massive at Cornell. More to the point, about 13 years ago, founded something called the Cornell Program in Infrastructure Policy, or CPIP. And so I'm really proud of how we have a 40-member in giving industry advisory board that really supports our efforts and supports our students with summer internships and full-time jobs. So just if you have a free moment to spare, take a look at our website. If you Google CPIP Cornell, you'll see what we're doing, which we'd like to develop and make bigger and more impactful. So please give us advice on that. Let's see this, before I get to Carl Benz, I will just let you know that this work is, so I'm on sabbatical right now at Stanford. I'll be going back in the summer to return to Ithaca, but I've been over the past 9 months on sabbatical at Stanford and had a chance to clear my head and to rethink my research agenda a little bit. And I've decided that this is really an important area to research. This is an extension of work with two friends and co-authors that I'm honored to work with, Peter Crampton and Axel Okenfels. Mainly Axel, I don't know, is at University of Cologne in Germany. And we had a set of papers on this whole notion that I'm going to get in today on real-time network-wide pricing of the use of roads, so road pricing. And I hope to, we got some press at that time, it's a little bit dated now, but I'm proud of the couple pages in Nature. It's very readable, that you can get the feel for this. The longer one is probably this working paper that's at the University of Cologne to give you a real feel for how it might work in the real world. The Giant Journal of Institute, very old German journal, is very readable on this. So I'll start off with motivating this in a little bit of an unusual way, and maybe a little bit of history and background on where I think we are in terms of surface transportation. And hopefully that'll get you excited, equally excited as what Peter and Axel and I are on the notion of using road prices to, and I'll make a strong claim, eliminate. I contend that if you can have prices change quickly enough in real time, that's not too strong of a word. You can clear the market for the use of road space, and you can actually eliminate traffic congestion. Maybe second, I'll contend this is the only way to eliminate traffic congestion. Duranton and Turner, two economists writing in the AER, basically showed if you try to build your way out of traffic congestion, you get induced demand, and pretty quickly the road will be just as congested as it was before. But you guys live in Southern California, so I probably don't have to tell you that. So a little bit of history. So you might recognize the name Benz. Invents in 1885 what we think of as the forerunner of all automobiles that are on the road today. If we had to pinpoint a time when the automobile was built and patented and mass produced, it would be Carl Benz in Mannheim in 1885. And you can go there and you can ride a prototype of this thing, not an original, and it goes pretty fast. First practical model, first car put into series production. Basically, I contend that what we're doing today out on the road, and I take a drive to the airport, will be pretty much a descendant of what Carl Benz developed in 1885, where it will be a car with its own engine and its own wheels, driven by the driver's line of sight, who is steering some sort of a mechanism with an internal combustion engine attached. That's 140 years ago. And if you stop and think about this, which, original is on display at the Mercedes-Benz Museum, basically what we have today are just additions to that. So they added a fourth wheel to it, right? They added a passenger compartment. They increased the power of the engine. They added shatterproof glass. They added a collapsible steering column. They added a dual braking system. They added cruise control. You get the point. Basically, what we drive on roads around the world, not just or all around the world, is an extension of Carl Benz invention in so long ago in 1885, and that we've seen disruption in a whole lot of other sectors. I'm going to wave this a lot today, like communications technology. I'm old enough to remember landline telephones and AT&T. And so seeing these massive changes in communications makes you wonder how much longer we have to wait for major disruption in surface transportation. So that's the history. It's given us tremendous benefits. I try to tell my students at Cornell, one of the best things you can do is have an attitude of gratitude about what you have. So when you study infrastructure, people like to complain about it in my infrastructure class, but you should be grateful for all the services that we have, particularly in a kind of developed country like the United States, where we have communication, we have clean water, we have wastewater treatment, we have mobility, right? And we have these services provided. We have pretty much reliable electric power most of the time. But what transportation gives you is a level of mobility that was unthinkable not that long ago. And so we've taken Carl Benz idea, we've developed it, but it has to ride along on roads. And so you can try to ride your Benz in a cornfield. It doesn't work very well. So we built out the complement to the automobile, which is the highways, in an enormous way. And this has given us I can drive down to see from Ithaca to see my mother in Baltimore in one day, unthinkable not that long ago. But there's a problem with this, right? As we build out roads that are unpriced in real time, and this is not just in the United States or developed countries, this is around the world, you see a picture like that. So that picture could have been taken from pretty much anywhere. Peter, my dear friend and co-author, just got back from Bangkok, and he says, the traffic in Bangkok is wild, right? Really intense. It could be the ring road around Moscow, for example. Moscow has a beltway. Would look pretty much like that. So you probably all know that the keeper of the data on traffic congestion globally is INRIX. I think it's TTI at Texas A&M in the United States, but around the world is the INRIX Global Traffic Scorecard. Waste, right? So as a neoclassically trained economist, we're trained to sort of look out for inefficiencies and waste. And the waste induced on our species, on humanity, by traffic congestion is incredible. At least one work hour lost in the United States. Germany, pretty similar. I was surprised Maybe not that surprised to be around London. It's congested too. It's actually worse in the United Kingdom. And you're probably aware that there is a cottage industry in academia now of documenting the social harms associated with traffic congestion. We could talk about causality, but I think it's pretty clear. Lost time and productivity associated with sitting in traffic is, and INRIX doesn't pick up. They give a number. I think, well, just the trucking industry in the United States last year estimates they lost $109 billion in just lost value from trucks sitting in traffic. I don't know that assigning these dollar values is that helpful, but fuel consumption, of course, goes up as sitting in traffic. Another thing is wear and tear on your vehicle. Just stop, start, transmission, engine, brakes, everything like that. Shocks wear out a lot quicker when you're just sitting and creeping along in traffic or going slow. I think it's one of the most stressful things I do, driving around the Bay Area. It increases your stress. It's not good for your health. Greenhouse gases, air pollution, and we could include the harm to the business community because deliveries of stuff are less certain. They're uncertain, associated with traffic congestion. You can't get just-in-time delivery. As well, the other thing that's disconcerting to me is as developing countries get richer, I've heard this a lot, one of the first things you want to do is get a car, right? And then you want to move in the city. And people have been moving off the country into the city since the time of the Romans, probably before the Romans, right? The idea was to get, being a farmer is tough. You would increase urbanization, which of course increases congestion along with growing wealth. There's just no way out. You're going to see that sort of a problem growing over and over. So the second thing,
very interesting. It says traffic congestion can increase divorce rates. I mean, what is the reason behind that?
Right? You're sitting the
passenger
pissed off, and you're not at home. You're commuting a long way. You're not there for dinner. Everybody's angry. I'd have to go back and read the causality in that paper. We do have hopefully being overweight. Maybe we can.
I thought it's more related to kind of like the arguments. I mean, should I change your land or not?
So great.
With a nagging, husband nagging wife. I was.
Yeah. I'll go back and read that to see the causal links, the channels that were associated with this. One thing, motivation for me at least is traffic safety, right? Hopefully I don't need to tell this group that traffic congestion is more risky. It's not safe to be in this type of congested traffic. And so I did a little bit of, and hopefully it's another motivator to think deeply about how real-time network-wide road pricing would work, okay, in the real world. And I was surprised I also struggled with how to convey the magnitude of the harm. And these are just deaths, right? And part of it is literally morbid, is measurement, because what's an injury? When I'm injured, well, I have a stiff neck and no, here you have a body, right? A person died. So you can measure that really clearly. And NHTSA's number, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration for last year, 39,345. Now our brains didn't really evolve to be able to understand what that number means. We're used to thinking in terms of 10 elephants or 15 zebras, or we can think in those terms. So try to break it down. So about 108 people on average die every day in New York roads. In the time of this talk that I'll give, 5 people will have died in traffic accidents on on US roads. So it gives you some idea of the rate that our traffic system is killing disproportionately younger people on our roads. It's interesting, the death rates peak for 21-year-olds, and then again for 91-year-olds. I guess that's not too surprising. This is from the National Safety Council. Leading cause of preventable death for everybody from 5 to 22. I was surprised at how many really young children are still dying in car accidents, given technology of baby seats and child restraints. Still there, second leading cause of preventable death for every age group. So motor vehicle crashes, despite the technologies, despite the airbags, despite the anti-lock brakes, despite the dual braking systems, are still doing this. I'm still trying to convey the magnitude of the harm. I wasn't in the Vietnam War, but I'm old enough to remember it. The notion was it was a quagmire. A huge number of American soldiers died. You can go to the wall in Vietnam, at the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, and get a sense of the number. It just takes us about 18 months, every year and a half in the United States. We're killing that same number of disproportionate younger people on the road. And I was in New York for 9/11. We could talk about that too. Basically takes us a month on US roads. Trying to put this in perspective. These memorials have a real impact on me because they're sincere. I was out in Palm Springs not long ago. People know that interesting town, but long, straight desert roads. Go fast. There's one of these probably about every third or half a mile along some of these roads, right? So somebody got killed there. So this is my view is that we should be thinking about every policy step we could take to mitigate the harms associated with this. I'm going to suggest there's 2 channels associated with road pricing that could help with this. So to the young people in the room, I would suggest developing a BHAG for you, a big, hairy, audacious goal. What are you doing? What's your goal in life? Why are you here? Well, hopefully you have a goal. So I refined my thinking about this over sabbatical, which I think was good. My big, hairy, audacious goal is to push the road pricing concept as much as we can, but you have to have a reason to do it. I believe that if we could get this system in place, my big, hairy, audacious goal is to eliminate traffic congestion. Yes, eliminate. And increase the use of connected and autonomous vehicles. I was telling Victoria, with a family in San Francisco, we don't have this much in the East, but they had Waymos. It was one of those nice San Francisco nights. My son says, let's take a Waymo. We all got in, late model Jaguar, total electric. It was amazing. Level 4 autonomy. So it still had the steering wheel, still has the brakes, but it goes by itself. And it was like a revelation for me, right? Because it's like, it's real. It's not just imaginary. And people on my board who run CAVNU, which is a autonomous vehicle road that runs from Ann Arbor to Detroit in Michigan. It's a Google investment project that these will never run into each other. So if we could switch the equilibrium from drivered vehicles to cabs, those vehicles know each other's there and they won't collide. If that's wrong, you guys think it's wrong, let me know. My BHAG is get to a point where a fatality on US roads would make front page news. That would be a big thing. And I also am happy to chat about the energy piece of this. I'll just say it, my problem with internal combustion engines is not that they're internal combustion, but that there's no scale, right? If you study infrastructure for an hour, you realize economies of scale are real. And if you have every car out there driving its own little internal combustion engine, the power is not being produced in an efficient way. And it could be fossil fuel, but you can produce power at a much larger scale. Anyway, what does this look like? This is my vision, the future of transportation. So cabs, we see them in Palo Alto now. So they're coming down the Silicon Valley, right from San Fran. You do see them around. People don't pay any attention to them anymore. They used to pester the autonomous vehicle and see if it would stop and all. People don't do that anymore. They're starting to accept the cabs as a normal part of life. People don't even look at them anymore. I'm happy to talk about alternative fuels. I don't want to get the talk to be hung up on alternative fuels, except a personal preference for me is my old Audi died. And so I went up to Rochester and bought a Chevy Volt, a tester of a Chevy Volt, which it has a battery in the gas engine. And I was sold. I just thought you get instant torque with power, right, with electric power. So it was smooth, right? But so we have engineers who are pushing out on cabs as we speak. They're working to make connected autonomous vehicles better. They're working on autonomous fuels. There are alternative fuels to think about different ways of powering the surface transportation system. A lot going on with 18-wheeler trucks and adding battery packs to old diesel trucks that I could tell you about that are making them much more efficient. The problem is there's just me and two other guys who are working on this one, real-time road prices. You can tell I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to push people to think about pricing the network in real time and how that would work, and to do research on, write papers and speak, et cetera, on how this would work, and get a test bed, get a jurisdiction to actually push the policy button and say, yes, we will give this a try. What will we get? We will get a transportation system where transportation is truly a service, where you may or may not own a car, but you would have the car might come to your house when you need it and take you from A to B. It would do that efficiently, but most importantly, it would do that without traffic congestion. Currently, we could have the smartest vehicle in the world sitting in San Francisco, and it would be stuck in traffic just like, and it could be very efficient, fuel efficient, but it would be stuck in traffic if you don't have this development. Okay, so I think we put the three together and we achieve my big, hairy, audacious goal. So key insights quickly, Menlong, yeah.
Yeah, I like this vision a lot, and this reminds me, the Dennis Burning's vision. He talked about three revolutions. There's a quite bit of overlap with your vision. He was talking about, automated CAVs, and electric vehicle. But the third one he talked about was shared mobility. And I'm wondering, within your vision, is there any kind of role of shared mobility is, part of it?
Yes. So am I allowed to use this?
Yeah.
So for one of my former students, he was the number 2 guy at this firm, VIA. And I just wanted to make sure I pronounce it right. So this is like Uber, but it's a small group, like 6-8 people. And they started off in New York City. So you have the app. You want to go from A to B, the app will tell you, go to the corner of Lexington and 34th Street in 10 minutes, and there will be a VIA. But there'd be a group of other people, and it's like an instant bus route, right? And it would take you and the other people, and then you'd have to walk a couple blocks. So that, I think, could be combined with my vision in a very interesting way, right? To get to the shared mobility. Is that what Sperling's talking about?
Yeah, shared mobility, like Uber, Waymo, but Waymo is CAV plus shared mobility. I mean, Mike.
Both what you said about the vehicle coming to your house and picking you up, so shared use of the vehicles, and then what you're talking about here, which is the shared ride aspect of it, so kind of quasi public transit.
Yep, that's the idea. Interesting thing, we could probably talk about this a lot, but they started this in New York City. So Uber and Lyft are expensive. Right. There's a lot of people on a regular basis that can't afford that, most people. And that was the idea. And it didn't, I forget how things went in New York City, but it was actually, this tended to work in more rural areas where we have a shared mobility was like not suburban, right? Not so much in New York City. But now I think it's done pretty well. So I'd love to talk about that some more.
Yeah, we can talk about it. I work with them now, so.
Yeah.
Oh, you're working with VIA? Okay, so you know all about it. Well, we could talk. I have a few connections with them, but very interesting model, I think. Just a couple of quick takeaways. As I said, progress being made in cabs and alternative by you guys, by the engineers, which is terrific. I submit it's going to be not limited, but traffic congestion and increasing congestion that we're facing is going to limit the value of those if they're stuck in traffic, wasting fuel, wasting time, increasing frustration, and that we need to make progress on what I call Crampton, Geddes, and Oakenfells approach to network-wide road pricing, that you'd finally get to this surface transportation system. And this could work for cars, trucks, vans, motorcycles, et cetera, to get to free flow and a reliable system. The other insight I want to explore is I believe that if you had free flow conditions, people would be more willing to use autonomous vehicles. Because it would be nice if we just got in the Waymo and the Waymo was being guided in its driving decisions by the current road price. And it's taking, just like water flowing around down a hill, the road price is directing the Waymo what roads to take, right? Based on current conditions. And I'm going to explain how we think that might work based on the wholesale power market that's getting these electrons into the room right now is run by ISO, an independent system operator. So I submit that the time is right. Now, William Vickery, that Wenlong and I have emailed a lot about, who won a Nobel Prize actually for auction theory, not for this, but he could have won multiple Nobel Prizes. Was at Columbia for years, was an economist who is credited mostly with developing the theory of how congestion pricing would work. Vickery actually wrote a piece in the late 50s because he lived in New York on peak load pricing of the subway system. And he said there should be peak and off peak. It's just a step function, right? But he had the basic idea. And, but the problem was, and I heard Vickery give a talk when I was a graduate student a long time ago. My thesis advisor, George Tully, was a friend of Vickery's. And he gave it at the university club at, now Vickery was brilliant. Delivery was not all that great. He was hard to follow sometimes, but he kept talking about a whirligig. He said there'd be a whirligig, things spinning around. And he thought it would be under your car. He said there'll be a whirligig under your car and your car will go over the road surface and something in the road would read your use of the road. And we would charge you for this, right? And people, I don't know, kind of said that won't work, Bill, that's crazy. So he did it in his driveway. He installed the things in his driveway, had bought some computer components, and he actually built himself. But Vickery couldn't see that it is above the car, right? It's satellites orbiting overhead, talking to cell phone towers, connecting to this gizmo that can know, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, your privacy is gone, that knows your location in X, Y, and Z space to the sub-meter level, very precisely. It's there. So the cataclysmic change is that the technology has leapt forward since Vickery's time to a degree that we can now measure your use of road space very precisely, okay? So that's the change. I don't know if people talk about kinematics, says there's the movement of an object in space without reference. My arm is causing my phone to move without reference to what causes the motion, right? These are developed, alternative fuels are developed, and developed in market design. So this work closely links to work by a bunch of economists at Stanford and other places that in the design of the market. This is the infomercial part of my talk. There's Peter, there's Axel. I've never met Axel before, even though we haven't met Peter a bunch of times. His dad he grew up in Ithaca. His dad was law dean, was dean of the law school, and he studied engineering at Cornell and then went to Stanford for his PhD in econ. So he has deep links to Cornell, Ithaca, wonderful pair of co-authors. But now Peter he taught at the University of Maryland for years and is emeritus there. He started this new entity that, please, if you want to take a look, it's a new website, Forward Market Design. And Peter claims, so the platform is open access, open source. He claims that if the public sector pushes the button, the big red button on the table, and we talked to the MTA in Singapore about this, I can tell you those stories over coffee. If we could get Singapore to push the button, it would take about 3 months for his firm, Forward Market Design, to set up a system of real-time network-wide road pricing. and implement this. Because again, I'm going to wave this a lot. The technology is no longer the barrier as it was in William Vickery's time. So I'm just putting this under policy developments that I think are going to disrupt the surface transportation system since the days of Carl Benz. Okay, let's just quickly, you guys probably we're here in the traffic center, quickly go through this, but there's a couple of ways economists would think about traffic congestion. One would just be in a simple sort of a demand and supply analysis. And I'll go to one of my favorite infrastructure facilities, which is the New Jersey Turnpike. My goal in life is to have a rest stop named after me at on the New Jersey Turnpike. So we model supply as being relatively inelastic. There are changes in supply that can occur, like one of my favorite examples is the zipper truck on the Golden Gate Bridge that can change one lane coming in. You want more lanes, and going out in the evening. So you have 3 lanes going in the morning. How do you 3 lanes going in? So there's a zipper with that moves the Jersey barriers. So an economist would interpret that as a supply response, but it's pretty inelastic. This is 4 a.m., right? Even the Jersey Turnpike is pretty quiet. Traffic is at free flow. There's some price associated with using the Jersey Turnpike. You're burning fuel, you're depreciating your vehicle, you're spending your time. Relatively low, the market clears. The problem is, and it's not to scale, the demand shifts way the heck out much more than this by 8 a.m., right? But the issue is, of course, the marginal price can't change. There is no marginal price for the use of road space. So what do you get? Everybody loads onto the Jersey Turnpike at 8 a.m. We would, in economics, would call this a shortage of road space. Everybody else on earth calls it traffic congestion, right? That's the issue in a supply and demand sense. And of course, it's much bigger than that. And this is Herbert Mooring has done this. So this is the notion of there's adding to that is the notion of the congestion externality. There's other externalities, okay? But the congestion one, I think, is the main one. In deciding how and when to travel, most travelers take into account congestion they experience. Gee, it's going to take me 2 hours to get to work. Few consider the cost they impose. You have to be an economist or a very unusual person to say, I am worried about congesting the road for others. That's just, human nature. So we probably know, again, in this group, that it's nonlinear and that traffic congestion at some point reaches this level. You go along, you're fine for a while, starts to slow down, traffic maybe gets a little bit backed up. But then if a few additional vehicles enter the road at peak times, everything slows down in a nonlinear way. So this is, if it gets really bad, there was actually cases of gridlock in New York City where the whole place just shut down. But normally you don't just get, bumper to bumper kind of traffic. The key, everybody knows this, the key thing though, again, I remind my students, that diagram works in both directions, right? So if you can shave the peak, if you can move a few vehicles off the peak, 5, 6, 7%, not a huge change, you can get back to relatively smooth traffic conditions. It doesn't take a lot of shifting of cars at this point to start to slide back down the curve and get to more, try to avoid the term free flow because it could be monopoly pricing that would get you to free flow. So we're trying to use the term max flow, like water through a pipe, right? Just to get the maximum flow that the pipe can handle, but have that be vehicles going over the road space, okay? So I have to, being a Chicago economist, have to quote Uncle Milty, Milton Friedman. It's shocking to me how long this has been understood. I would like to write a paper about how long the quote, the good economist correct solution has been understood, but not really implemented. People may know Gabriel Roth. I don't know, he was at TRB for a long time. Passed away recently, great thinker in this area. This is up in the epilogue in a 1998 book, but Friedman and Borstein were writing in the late in the early 50s. So again, went along the intellectual history of road pricing. I quote this in my little AEI book too. This is all supply side, basically. They're talking about ways to finance, allocate resources for roads. How should their production be financed? Whether a particular model should be used, just like producing automobiles. So they're saying the problem is the lack of marginal pricing of road use. But the granddaddy is really William Vickery on this. And I was recently going back, and I want to do some more of this. I think we could think in tandem when long. Some of his earlier papers, I think the 1963 American Economic Review paper is really interesting to go back and look at. This is the first part of that paper, begin with a proposition. No other major area of pricing priority so irrational, so out of date and so conducive to waste as in urban transportation. Two aspects are particularly deficient. Peak off peak differentials. So he just means peak load pricing. He didn't, I don't think, talk about smooth pricing that we're going to talk about. And then gross underpricing of some modes relative to others. He means roads, right? The use of the roads is the dollar price is zero. And of course, that distorts people's mode choices all the time. So I've talked to transit people. I say, you should talk to me and Peter and Axel, because people would be more willing to use public transport. Maybe just a quick footnote, if people want to talk about New York City congestion pricing. I have dear friends and colleagues who live in New York City. They say that the city buses, which used to be stuck in congestion like everything else, are now moving smoothly through the city. And you see more people taking buses. I know people explicitly said I used to drive or take an Uber, now I'm taking the bus. So we're seeing this happen, right? Anyway, Vickery is the guy who should get the credit for laying out the benefits of having road pricing. It's so detailed, I've sliced it by demand side versus supply side, okay? Environmental externalities can be included. As long as you have a price, just like you go to the grocery store and there's a price for, the price of bananas is high, you might think about eating apples or oranges or some other fruit. It would be the same with transportation. One of the things I think that's really underappreciated is how simple the consumer's decision, the driver's decision would be. And I'm going to get into forward markets. So not only the current spot price for the use of roads, but there's so much volume. Every time you get a vehicle going over a piece of road, you have a market price. And then if you have enough thickness, you can have a forward market. So that is, what is the price of the road use going to be tomorrow? What is it going to be next week? You see, so Chicago is driven by commodity markets. So number 10 wheat, right? The wheat market. There's a spot market and a forward market for the delivery of wheat or hogs or pork bellies or coffee or tea. At some point in the future, we envision the same thing for road space. That gives you the direction of change. So you know if road space is becoming more scarce or less scarce. And that will drive your decision about when you commute. Okay, so it becomes much more simple for your decision, safety, and of course, the mode choice that he's talking about. I think the supply side is actually really underappreciated. In other words, since talk about the Romans, but it goes back to the ancient Egyptians, infrastructure spending becomes politicized. It just does. Where the road is going to be, where's the power plant going to be, where is the wastewater treatment going to be? Most of the good stuff, people want a road. So Adam Smith, I start off my syllabus with a quote from Adam Smith, writing in 1776, talks about how roads are put in the front land in a lord's manner, right? But with road pricing, you can take the politics out, because it says where the price is the highest in the peak, i.e. where people are willing to pay the most during the peak to ride on that road, is where you should add capacity. It's a number. right? And you say, okay, if people are not willing to pay much and the big don't add capacity there. So we have a problem with this. The other thing that Peter hammers on is this one, technological innovations. We, with all due respect to everybody in the sector, and we can look at the productivity numbers on this, the rate of productivity change is very slow. In heavy civil construction and road construction, if you shift to this model, this supply side benefit will manifest. The other thing we could talk about if people want to is the use of the revenue. I don't know if we want to get into that, talk to people who run dynamic lanes. Public sector people are amazed at how much revenue is that to an economist saying it's really valuable, right? People are willing, it's like buying a loaf of bread. People are willing to pay that because it's valuable. It's the same thing for dynamic pricing. If you do this to the whole system, you can sort of imagine. So an economist is going to say, reduce the taxation of other sources that's distortionary, because this is it alleviates a distortion. This is a non-distortionary source of revenue, but we can talk about that later if you wish. Okay, so how would this work? I'll probably keep you guys here all afternoon talking about this. Okay, how would this work? So just so you know the verbiage, there's a literature in economics, and it's interesting, something I want to get into more, but this is called a missing market. So something has happened such that there's a scarce good or service out there that should be allocated through market forces with prices fluctuating, right, in response to supply and demand, and it's not. Okay, so the market is missing. And yeah, so I come from a tradition of, it comes out of another one of my heroes, Ronald Coase, who was a British economist, wrote a paper in 1960 called The Problem of Social Cost. And the problem of social cost is externalities. It's really dealing with the textbook issue of a negative externality. It could be air pollution from a steel mill. It could be water pollution from a plant that makes white paper and uses bleach and puts dioxin in the river, right? They just put the waste in the river. If you live near London Heathrow, it could be the noise pollution associated with aircraft taking off and landing at London Heathrow. Coase, goes back to A.C. Pigou, who said you need to tax it, right? We have an optimal tax. It's not really about raising revenue. This tax is about correcting behavior and getting to the optimal allocation. Coase is really a response to Pigou in a lot of ways. Coase says, wait, we need to think about that. This is not a case where a steel mill is harming the local residents the way a Pigouvian tax implicitly says tax the steel mill, right? This is a problem that economists have been studying for 150 years, which is competition for the use of a scarce resource. And that scarce resource is the air, right? In the steel mill case, we want to do something with the air. We want to breathe it, but that steel mill wants to dispose of pollutants. So how do we resolve the conflict? Coase says we normally resolve this through property rights allocation. And so it's a property rights problem. The right to the use of the air is unclear. It's a use right. And so what we need to do is take a couple steps. Create a use right, ius tendi. I don't know if I'm saying the Latin correctly, but it does go back to Roman law. It's a common notion that there is an excludable right to use. If you rent an apartment from the landlord, you don't own the apartment, you just buy a use right every month from the apartment for the apartment. So this is a standard thing. But here we make those key, this is key, make the rights tradable so that it be a tradable right. And then we work to make that market efficient. We try to make the market operate smoothly. This is what a stock market is doing when you trade equities, when you trade financial products. You can think of them at least partly as trying to reduce transaction costs. So these would be 3 steps. There is now a long and I would say pretty successful history in the use of a Coasean approach to try to solve externality problems. And so we have a lot to lean on for this. One example is sulfur dioxide permits that were in the 1970 Clean Air Act. Well, the original act was 1970. It was 1991 that the amendments were put in that created a cap and trade for sulfur dioxide. This was when we were burning a lot of dirty coal in the US. I like ITQs, individual transferable quotas, for overfishing. The problem with, it's a commons problem for overfishing because the fish are commons. People fish them out before the next guy gets them, and suddenly they can't reproduce. You could drive them out of existence. So different jurisdictions have those. One of the big ones is again, this uses radio spectrum. And Coase, before he wrote the 1960 paper, wrote a 1958 paper that laid out how radio spectrum is basically an example of the commons problem. And it's interference, right? It's interference where if Wen Long's radio, his radio transmitter has a certain power, is emitting a signal, and I have mine nearby at a certain power, we interfere. You get that interference on the radio sometimes. And that's just a commons problem. This is actually in use now. The FCC, these things are worth billions and billions of dollars to address this. There was a proposal, it hasn't been, I guess it was 2010, something like that, for takeoff and landing slots. My understanding of airports is that it's not really the gates that are the congestion, it's actually the arc through the air. There's an optimal arc from Boston to Baltimore. And for the plane to take off and land, that's called a slot, which is important. And it's just a standard congestion problem. And so we need to define the right to use that slot, then create a market for that. There's a pretty recent literature on that. Same for work on immigration was similar to that. My point is that there's a whole, and this is not exhaustive. So there's a whole bunch of these, okay, that could do this. How would this apply to roads? Okay, so this is where I'm inviting everybody who shares this passion to think about how this would work. Peter and Axel and I are working on it. We have taken the verbiage of the airline, Peter came up with this, of the airline slot through the air, and we're calling the right to use a particular piece of road at a particular point in time. That's the use right. You have the right to this stretch of road at this point in time. You don't own the road, but you can drive your vehicle. You might be United Parcel Service, and you have the right to drive your truck or FedEx or Amazon over this particular time, and that's a slot, is the use right. We make the slots tradable in a slot market. As soon as you have a trade, you have a price. So the key here is to get to a price. Remember, it's the price, a resource that previously was unpriced. And so this is a very Coasean solution to the problem of traffic congestion. People say, well, Rick, would you price my local street? Yes, it's like a utility model. If you just want to toast a little bread in the morning, does your electric provider say, oh, it's just a little electricity? No, you're priced per use, right? So all roads is price network in real time. The key are not just, that's the spot price. What's the current price for me using the road? I get in my car, I drive to work. How much am I going to pay? That's the spot price. The key is the forward market, a key. I think that's why Peter calls his new firm forward market design, right? Because forward markets are so important. I want to know if I wait 15 minutes or 30 minutes to drive to work, am I going to pay more or less? If I'm going to pay more, I'm going to drink my coffee and get in the car and go. If it's less, I'm going to answer emails. I'm going to stay at home and wait 30 minutes. That waiting shaves the peak, right? And reduces the traffic congestion. You might say, how would this work? Would you have monopolistic power? It's going to be chaos. So here's where we rely on other sectors to implement an independent system operator, an ISO. So just so people know,
I have a question. What exactly is a slot? We did some similar work trading paths between origin destination pairs at a particular time. We didn't assume people were changing their departures. We just had them bidding or trading different paths to get to the destination. So is that what you have in mind, or are you links in a network? Is that a slot?
Yeah, more, it's like, I don't know. So this suppose this I-83.
Yeah.
This is York, Pennsylvania. Just making this up, right? This is Baltimore down here. I'm winging it here.
I don't know where it's.
So this
I
interstate
wrote that
83
numerous
pretty
times.
straight from north. This is headed south, right? Major interstate. So what we're thinking of as a slot would be, so suppose you're headed from York or Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, down to Baltimore. A slot would be the right to use a certain segment
Yeah,
along I-83 at a certain point in time.
got it.
Right. That's what we're thinking of. Now, I have no idea how long or
Yeah.
short this is the optimal slot. A lot of things, maybe it's a cop out, but I rely on the market to evolve in a way that is sensible. Like we have, wheat is sold in bushels, right?
Right.
Now I guess you could do fractions of bushels, but still a bushel, bushel basket is an old concept, but the commodity markets in Chicago still trade number 10 wheat by the bushel, right?
Yeah.
So it would kind of be like that,
Okay.
right? I think. But when I'm open to suggestions.
Yeah.
Think about a slot. We're thinking about the right to use I-83 at a particular time between York and Baltimore, but very well-defined slice of road. Yeah, yes, sir. Yours, then him.
I mean, you may cover this later, I'm not sure, but I was just curious, what sort of protections are in place to keep like some, I don't know, I mean, I'm from the Bay, there's plenty of billionaires around, somebody being like, I want to own all of I-280 from SF to San Jose today. I'm just gonna pay $1 million and just clear the entire road myself.
Yeah.
Which will create like terrible congestion everywhere else, but no one can overpower their $1 million bid on it.
Yeah, so that's why we rely on the independent system operator. So they have no right to do that. The ISO clears the market in both the spot and the forward markets. You could be a billionaire, but you can't buy the use of the road. I mean, if you're talking about them sort of monopolizing, is that the idea? The
Or
ISO
someone
should
like
prevent
Amazon
that.
being like, oh, we want to be really efficient, let's just purchase every slot because we can
Yeah.
afford it.
No, the ISO should prevent that. You can make a similar case in power that we're, I don't know, some giant consumer of power. So we're going to buy up, all this power. You have to pay for it on a marginal basis. But there are these monopolistic concerns that you would have, which is why the ISO is so central to this thinking. And one of the things, another thing to get into in more detail is thinking about the institutional arrangements that govern the ISO in roads. The benchmark I would take is power, right? And since we're onto it, I'll just say, right now, as we sit, California ISO is clearing, not retail. Like if you're a household, right, you're a retail customer, the retail prices change. This is the wholesale market, like big users, buyers and sellers of power. We're over here. I would be up here. My house is in New York State. It would be New York ISO. By the way, Peter Crampton set up the wholesale power market for Mexico. He says that they didn't, some changes have occurred since then. Do people know the story of ERCOT and when they had the cold spell in Texas? I shouldn't laugh. Cold spell in Texas and everybody turned on their electric heaters. It's Texas, right? So you just have a little electric heater at the same time. And the grid basically melted down. Peter was on the board of ERCOT. The governor fired them all. Anyway, had to tell that story. But you get the idea. The ISOs are really big. The ISOs are big. You can go to PJM right now. Look at how many states are being wholesale power market, and you can look at the current wholesale price of power. I forget, it's every couple minutes it changes. But the ISO has the responsibility to deal with these types of monopolistic tendencies, right? Where you've got one user and to keep the market competitive, right? So let me just, I don't know if I did it here. I do have a little bit more on the ISO, but the ISO is responsible for just like the power grid, keeping the flow of road use operating smoothly. And a lot of work needs to be done on how you would translate this concept of an electric. I mean, vehicles are not electrons. It's an analogy to electrons running along a wire, vehicles on a road, but there's big institutional differences. And exploring that, I think, is really important. I want to say another lesson. I've had people give this talk and they say, sure, Rick, pretty soon we'll have flying cars, road pricing. I want to stress that this is not like that, right? We are actually closer than you think. Because one of my favorite states that I've never visited, I love their transportation policy. I don't know how many people follow this, is now pricing their system network-wide. For reasons, there was a dissertation to be written on that. The state of Oregon was the first state to have the British call it hypothecated gas tax. So that means that the revenue, British term, I think we would call it earmarked or dedicated, where the revenue from the state's gas tax went to the roads and diesel. Okay, and they did this like in 1913 or something. And so the idea was, hey, we're going to pay for the roads by taxing gas. And of course, in those days, every vehicle used gas or diesel. And then other states started to follow. It wasn't until the Second World War, President Eisenhower, the Cold War, Eisenhower wants to build the interstate highway system. The federal government borrowed the idea of a hypothecated gas tax from the states. So the states have been adopting this. Now we have the state of Oregon, 10 years ago, implements a network-wide. They got rid of the state's gas tax. This is not a new tax. It is, they saw the writing on the wall, which I may have talked about when you heard me, which is, we're trying to discourage the use of fossil fuels, right? But at the same time, the road network is being funded by a tax on fossil fuels. What could go wrong? My analogy, I may have said it is, let's fund the healthcare system with a tax on cigarettes, right? But on the other hand, we want to discourage cigarette smoking,
But
right?
maybe
Pretty
they
soon
are
it's unsustainable.
not- They are not exclusive, right? Like we
What's
can
that?
still be taxing gas because we don't want people to use
Yeah.
gas, and we can still price road.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. My point with this slide is only to say that there's a major network in the United States, which is
Oh, yeah.
Oregon, where every piece of road is priced in, but the problem is it's flat, right? Economists hate this, right? The price cannot vary. It cannot do its job of clearing the market. It's like 2 or 3 cents per mile as the ruck, and they don't, I don't know if people, I'm sorry, I'm repeating. The other term is an MBUF, a mileage-based user fee. A buddy of mine Peter Aitken, used to run MBUFA, which was the Mileage-Based User Fee Association in Washington that lobbied for road pricing, right? Oregon is the first in the world, I'm pretty sure, have a network-wide road usage charge, or RUC, but with flat prices. The other piece that is already implemented, I think I have it right, as of December 23, there are about 60 dynamically priced lane corridors in the United States doing essentially what we are advocating, right? Where you know the price, you see the price before you enter the lane. It's dynamic. They read the current demand for the lane. It changes in real time. What we are talking about is a combination of Oregon's system with the priced managed lanes to create a priced road network run by the ISO. So, how would this work in transport? If you apply the ISO, again, both spot and forward markets for road slots are really critical. The price I view is like if you hold a funnel up to a sink, you adjust the water flow with the handle. And if you get the water flow just correctly, it runs maximum flow through the funnel. The price is like the handle, right? To an economist. The price is regulating the amount that's flowing through. Higher, more people back off on the road, you slow down the flow through the tunnel, through the funnel. That's the analogy I often use for students. Now this maybe gets to your point earlier. Coordinate with public sector road owners, of course. They're the owners of the road. They remain the owners of the road. They get the revenue. They are the ones working with the ISO to create the use rights. And you might get large players like Amazon, UPS, FedEx playing in the forward market because they want to lock in their price. right? They want to hedge. They don't like risk. Risk is a bad. So if you're Amazon, you might be terrified that the road price down the road, right, is going to be higher. It's going to cost you a lot more. So you might want to be playing, quote unquote, in the forward market to hedge that, right? And of course, you'd have traders, just like you have in Chicago commodity markets as we speak, right? Key market principle, though, the ISO is this thing that kind of sits above it all and has very simple mandates. It is ensuring open access. It is ensuring that the road network, just like the power network, is open to all. Transport network is open to all. And another way of saying it is transport capacity cannot be withheld. In a monopoly sense, you're worried not about the monopolist pricing up, but pulling back on quantity. That will drive the price up because you slide up the demand curve. But basically, you're worried about capacity being withheld. And it has to be, of course, on everybody's treated the same. Your car, my car, right? I'm not going to say I don't like you. I'm going to charge you more. And it's transparent. The ISOs in power right now, you can go to the internet and see prices changing in real time for PJM and the other wholesale grid operators. So, and there's a whole governance structure to this that needs to be thought about. Here's a crude view of what a market model would look like, where you have the ISO and you have users. This would be tough. Transaction costs would be high for the different users, but we think this would evolve, okay? And it would evolve in a way, I'll just jump ahead, where you have SPs. So you have service providers, and the service providers would give you like a monthly plan, and they would deal with the ISO. You, as a vehicle owner, would contract with the service provider, and you would pay some amount. So this is sort of the way the wholesale electricity market operates. So this would be would lower transaction costs for you, basically. Say a few things about the forward trading. Mitigates risk, as in other markets. It performs two functions. It mitigates risk, but importantly, it gives you the direction of change in the market. It tells you what your behavior should be. They compete in road use in forward markets, and they would develop the app that allows you to express demand, basically. Let me show you how that might look. So this is, again, Peter. This is Peter Crampton saying he studied computer science and basically coming up with what would the user interface look like, okay? So he created this imaginary company, Forward Transportation Incorporated. Lock in prices and drive with confidence. So Peter is, in his prior life, in the DC metro area where there's a lot of traffic congestion. And suppose he wants to go from his home to his work and he wants to leave at 8 a.m. The forward prices would tell you the rate of change. If you wait 10 minutes, if you leave earlier, 10 minutes or later, you're going to pay more. But if you wait 20, you're going to be in the green, you're going to pay less, okay? So the current cost per trip, probably too low, about $4, and you buy your trip, okay? The key here, though, is this, in the terms, let me just say, one reason I'm putting this up, this is important. People are already doing this, okay? This is not a technology where you have to go out to the guy on the bar stool next to you and explain that he has to do something new. No, because everybody, particularly younger people, are already using Google Maps to walk across the street, right? So all, this is incorporated. So how would the interface change? You would get a monthly road bill just like you get for electric, or we get a water bill in my house, just like you get for anything else, right? But what you would see on your app is just changes, right? This is the current thing. Here, Peter's over here. He's at the University of Maryland, but he has to go to a meeting in Tyson's Corner. And so what's it currently say? I don't know how many people have driven on the DC Beltway. It's unpredictable, right? Typically 440 to an hour and 15 variability, right? And then there's red and yellow here along the Beltway, along Cabin John Road. And then he gets over there, but it's frustrating. It's burning fuel. It's wearing out his brakes. It's wearing out his patience. With Crampton, Geddes, and Oakenfells, it looks like this. It's not a big change, right? It's blue because we've shaved the peak, but he sees this. I submit that red arrow is one of the most important arrows in economics because it tells you the direction of change in the current road use. So that's saying, get in your car, Peter, and go, because it's getting more expensive. But if you leave now, you pay $3.42, but look at the blue, right? And you'll get over there 28 minutes. Very little variation because we've got people coming onto and off of the system in real time in an optimal sort of a way, and you get that. So this is a key thing Peter likes to stress. I'm channeling him, is that people are already doing this, right? They're already using this app. You just go from this to this when you get the prices right.
Yeah, but the value of time is 75. This is 75 times 28 minutes.
Well, so that you could put in your current, you can adjust that. And you could say, I currently have a high value of time. I currently want to get there urgently. Or you can put in a low value.
So it's the $3 calculated by 75 times 0.5 hour.
No, this is that's what the road price would be. That's what your current road price. You could say, I want to go fast or I want to go slow. I mean, that's just telling you sort of, I'm urgent. It doesn't have to be value of time. It could be, I'm happy to go slower, go faster. I mean, don't get too hung up on the value of time thing.
It's, if you would allow me, the Google Maps already has, do you want to take the best route, the quickest route, or the most fuel efficient route? So if you just change that to the value of,
It's the same.
it's the same idea, just
Same idea.
different wording.
Victoria, did you have?
So I was just curious, so the value of time is just going to impact the order of the recommendations for
Right.
travel?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So this will be more expensive, right? I think that's right.
So for example, if my
But it's
value,
the same idea, but just putting it
if
in.
my
numbers.
value of time were 0, it would give me the least expensive trip, no matter how long.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's consistent, except, well, we have prices.
So,
So this-
I don't know if this will be discussed. I mean, I can see some cybersecurity issue. I mean, what if hackers, they just add a lot of not real trips
Yeah,
and to game the system,
Yeah.
to hack the system to, for whatever reason. Because nowadays with the internet, there's a lot of, the number of views, right? The number of
Yes.
users, they are just creating a lot of bots.
yes.
So will we have a lot of, those bots?
I would think that would be the job of the independent system operator, is to protect it. That's out of the cybersecurity things are kind of out of my area of expertise. I mean, how you would do that? I would think it's interesting, how Waymo's already dealing with it. Or Zoots, right? The competitor to Waymo in San Fran.
Yeah.
How are they dealing with the cybersecurity? Because couldn't you hack in right now to Waymo and make it go crazy? I mean,
There's a lot of research in that, but definitely it looks like, at the operational level, at the technology level, those needs to be.
oh, absolutely, yeah. This is why I would think work on the ISO. I mean, we have that with power systems, right? Where you're very concerned about people hacking into power lines.
But with power system, I can see that it's kind of relatively stable users. It's linked to, our house, the building.
Yeah.
While the number of trips is much more volatile. I mean, how do you know if I would make a normal trip or not type of thing? If I'm reporting that, I'm going to, Los Angeles, actually I may or may not go in or things like that. How, all this, submissions, all these demands.
Yeah.
This may not be real demand. I mean, hack demand in a sense. How to.
You have to pay for it though, right?
Yeah.
You'd pay to hack.
Yeah, I mean, there could be potential. I mean, how
Yeah.
the system operates. If there's a lot of, I suppose the system works depending on how many demands are requested.
I think I would lean on this
Maybe.
service provider here.
Maybe it's linked to our bank account.
It might be their job, not, this is the driver, right?
Okay, yeah.
You're contracting with these guys are contracting with.
Yeah, there's a contract.
So I would think a lot of what you're bringing up would be a service provider
Mhm.
task to solve that problem.
Yeah, there should be
Right.
some technical.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want the drive, this is the
There
vehicle
would be
drivers
some, you know.
to have to work that out. I would think I would use service provider one versus service provider two.
Yeah.
Because of, they have dealt with the, the big user issue and the cybersecurity issues, right?
Yeah, even for example, I'm riding bike many
Yeah.
times, but I'm allowed to drive a car or type of thing.
Yeah,
How, this will be interact.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. But I guess that it's a bit of a weak response, but it's partly because I don't understand the technical issues involved very well, but I think that my sense is that the service provider role, we're working with the independent system operator would be concerned about that, right? When I'm trying to market my road product to users.
But maybe conceptually, I feel this market might be much less regulated than other markets.
And why is that?
In the sense that, these users, it's much harder to define because, the commodities like trips, right? But we change our minds all the time. The commodity might not be, the demand might not be so well defined. That maybe that's vaguely, I'm just thinking conceptually, because, yeah.
Yeah, just hand up.
Yeah, I mean, if one long wants to finish it, it's fine, but I'm just curious, like, when it comes to, if you go back to your, the setup of the market with the different providers and then the big ISO on top of it, which parts of this do you envision being public versus private? Because from my understanding, like in the electric market, like your service provider would be like PG&E or something, or like somewhat equivalent to that, or because I feel like I've interacted with a lot of service providers for utilities that kind of suck. Like,
I think
and
of these guys interacting with the road owners, which would be the public sector. And that they control the capacity, they're clearing the market. And the service providers are not, I don't envision them deal. So the city of Ithaca, where I live, I don't envision the service provider dealing directly with the city of Ithaca about this. I think that would be the ISO. And these guys would be providing the services, right? Hopefully, I don't know if they would suck or not, but they would compete, hopefully, right? To provide a monthly or whatever the unit, just like a utility model, but where the ISO clears, it's not a rate of return regulated price. It's a price that clears the market for road use, and that's critical because that gets you to the zero congestion result. But that, I think, is the role of the service provider. So these guys are not dealing with the public road owners. Nothing is privatized in this case, right? The word privatization has been over misused in some ways. So we're not envisioning any of that. This is a use right. That's why I hammer on the stripping out the use right.
Yeah, so do you think the road price sensitivity will be same level with the electrification? Because I think that the big difference between the electrification versus road pricing is that the supply is more restricted compared to the electrification. Because
Okay.
yeah, another thing is that
Oh, you mean because you can ramp up power, but you can't ramp up roads? Is that?
yeah, and also if the specific load has reached the capacity compared to the electrification, the supply can be a supply from other sources of like states, other like plants, but the road is kind of different. There can be supplies from other like road capacity, right? So in terms of the
There
specific,
cannot be, is that?
yeah,
But the whole point is
So it's
to
less elastic.
avoid that congestion point, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so
So we would
that was
never-
my graph where you have, I didn't do it very well, but you should have an economist would say it's a very inelastic supply curve. It's not perfectly straight up, but it's pretty close.
Yeah.
Right, so that's what you're saying, is it's inelastic and you have demand shifting pretty much in the face of an inelastic supply curve.
Yeah.
So you should get these, the price needs to change. And of course, we worry about price spikes. We worry about that surge pricing sort of thing. So that's why the forward markets to mitigate, to hedge against that risk are important.
Yeah.
Right, but you're absolutely right about
yeah.
ramping up power.
So my thinking is that the sensitivity of the road pricing will be much more sensitive than electrifications. Because supply is more restricted and they cannot be replaced by other sources of the supply.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's different, yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point.
One idea to that is that we're sort of not talking about, well, you mentioned it quickly, but
Yeah.
if the price spikes enough, you're saying you can't replace that demand with other roads.
Yeah.
You can with public transportation, and that's sort of one of the like side issues is if the price gets high enough, you get people to use other forms of transit.
Yeah,
And there are some users like Amazon USPS
Yeah.
that can't do that, but that's why they use the.
Yeah,
forward
absolutely.
market to
I mean,
push
I was focusing, because his question was mainly supply side, right?
Yeah.
So people could substitute into, they could walk, or they could use a bike, or they
Yeah,
could
yeah.
carpool, or they could use public transit. There's a whole bunch of substitutes. Where you don't have that for power, right? Pretty much you need electrons to run your light bulbs, I don't want to be flippant. Do you know what I mean? So So I think I think one of the things that we really underestimate is how much people will adapt to changing prices. And I can't stand here and come up with all the ways that people, because they face a price and they're gonna say, darn, I'm gonna get friendly with my neighbor over there who works close to where I work.
Yeah.
And we're gonna carpool, right?
I don't know if you will cover this, but I've been reading a lot of this literature and so on. And
Oh, good.
the most, concerning parts in general among like people studying this is acceptability from public, right? Like,
Yeah.
we know that we have to do this. It's just how are we going to
Oh,
tell
well.
people we need to do
Yeah, I
this?
mean, I'm happy to, I know we're running out of time, but the equity is a big issue here. There needs to be more work on the equity piece. I think we've learned that traffic congestion itself is regressive. To an economist, that means it hurts the poor more than the wealthy. The wealthy are able to figure out they're more flexible, first of all, in when they go to work. Oftentimes, lower income people have to work a shift. So you have to be there at a certain time. Traffic congestion hurts you more if you have to show up at 8 a.m., for your job. Both poor and rich would benefit from this. Really, it's about the standard deviation of travel time that I think is a real problem, the uncertainty associated with travel time, and they are hurt by that as well. Maybe there's one thing here that has been bothersome when I've given this talk in the past is people are not used to a world where the value of roads change in real time. People are used to a world where it's all the same. And they say, well, people who are poor have to commute longer distances to get to work, Rick. So your system is going to charge the poor more. That is very much unclear because the road that they drive on longer may be lower value in the sense that the price per unit may be lower. They drive longer, but they end up paying less in the long run. And higher, it depends on the network. You'd have to model the network. Where higher income people may be using the DC Beltway, I'll go back to that facility, is an expensive road in the peak. And the people who are higher income getting their law firms and so forth are willing to pay those prices. So even if they go a shorter distance, they may end up paying more because the road value is higher. So I'm just saying you have to allow road prices you have to allow this different world to come into play. We also note Crampton, Geddes, and Oakenfells. You have to differentiate, tell the students, vertical equity, rich versus poor versus horizontal. And horizontal is that everybody uses the same road space, they all pay the same. That's the independent system operator, non-discriminatory terms. That's equitable in the sense that if Wen Long drinks 6 beers, he pays for 6 beers. If I drink 1 beer, I pay for 1. We'd say that's fair. He drank 6 beers, I had 1. So each pay, right? That's horizontal equity. There's also literature that's very recent. We tried to hire a cook, by the way, and couldn't get him. But on distributional effects of dynamically priced lanes on highways, and they find, that these benefit lower income groups more. But again, there's no examples of what we're talking about. If you were to combine Portland with dynamic pricing of lanes, you would pretty much get to the Crampton, Geddes, and Oakenfells, result. But this is, this is probably the best we have now. Maybe I know we're running out of time. This is Durranton and Turner. You can't build your way out of this, so don't just try to add capacity. And I'll just show a couple of examples here. And I do want to say, everybody uses the term wrong. They talk about New York City as doing congestion pricing. New York City is doing cordon pricing. So take anything away from this talk. It's a circle, it's a cordon. London did this, Malmo did this, Trondheim did this, and New York has just, we hope Trump doesn't overturn it, has just done this. It's a cordon. Stockholm did this over 10 years, a long time ago, and a lot of water around there, but they drew a cordon around Stockholm. And so we think what we're talking about is like Vickery would approve of is congestion pricing. So they had a lot of traffic congestion in Stockholm, right? Here's what it looked like before, last day without charges, after economics works, right? The problem is you don't want it to be monopolistic. You don't want it to be, excessively low traffic, but you can see, I don't know how many people are following the news coming out of New York City. Travel times have fallen. The peak it's working. People have been shaved. What I think is interesting is the safety. The pedestrian vehicle accidents rate is way down as a result of the traffic flowing more smoothly. I think the interactions of congestion and safety are very interesting. So this is pretty much what we're seeing in New York City. London, central London's actually pretty small, and central London, people may recognize some of these areas did this with, and the Londoners, by the way, have been very innovative in tinkering with the congestion charge. So I've been told, oh, Rick, you should go talk to the Londoners because they have fiddled with this, and they've gotten apparently down to a very nice system, and everybody in London says this cordon charge is much better. So I'll stop with that. Happy to chat some more if people have questions.
Yeah, so when you talk about real-time congestion pricing, like how are we discretizing this real time? Like in half an hour, 10 minutes, seconds?
Probably every couple minutes, I would think. That's remarkable. And again, the way I think about it is use the electric power market ISO as a benchmark. And then go from there, adjust from there. So if we need prices to change quickly, more quickly, change it faster than the ISO. But the ISOs are changing prices of wholesale power every couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So it's equilibrating supply and demand.
Right. We need to make decisions, right? And when we are driving, so I guess that would be in an ideal world where all the vehicles were automated.
Yeah.
Would just be able to work in a second, like per second, real time changing, and you could just set your car. You could just tell your car, I don't want this trip to cost me more than that.
Yeah.
And it would find other routes. So
yeah, it would find some.
Right.
That's the idea.
Yeah. So I like this.
My vision is that
yeah.
your autonomous vehicle would be guided by those current real-time prices, and it would just go.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there. One thing, people want to do it anyway. If you look over, we drive down the road, look at the person next to you at the stoplight, they're going like this, right? They want to be working.
Yeah.
So if we could just get them to autonomy plus road prices, and I like, electric power, you'd be pretty close to this system. So people would, some people say, oh, they'll never give up driving. But the way I see it, people, they don't want to be driving. They want to be fiddling with this or making a call or whatever anyway. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering,
Thank you.
especially for the Rolls Royce charging, do you charge it ex ante or exposed?
We're envisioning like a monthly plan that you sign up for.
Subscription.
A subscription model that and again, I was speculating to Long's question about how the service providers would be structured. but you might have rollover. So if you save more money, it rolls over into your next month. So you have an incentive. What's that?
So it's like exposed.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. That's another thing that would need more thinking, right? Is how those monthly plans would work. But you obviously want the driver to still have an incentive to conserve on road space. What we want is substitution. Right?
Yeah, a quick following question is if we do it exposed, then the drivers do not know how much they will charge when they enter the road. They only know after they reach home. So the question is, if you let AV just to route it, do they know how much they will charge?
But do they need to know? If they just say, I wanted to minimize costs and the AV is going to go wherever it goes, you'll get that blue line and the driver's happy, right?
Well, but the user is never going to know exactly what the cost of a trip is. And I think that humans are actually very, like we don't like uncertainty. So
is that what you're saying, that you don't know the cost? Like,
Yeah. If you don't know the cost for sure, how did you make decision?
well, we want the driver to face that, to know that price for a trip. Oh, you're saying if you do it with an automated vehicle.
Yeah, if
You're saying, not saying in the case where you're just taking this in your car, you're saying if it's an automated vehicle.
Yeah,
Price, right?
yeah. And if we do exposed pricing,
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could have like a digital readout or something that would tell you how much the driverless car is currently, the bill that they're running up or something like that. So you would expose the customer, right, to the road price through, even though the car would be going through its route based on the road price, it would be telling the passenger, right, the payer, the customer, how much it was bringing up. Would that solve the problem?
might be.
Yeah.
Following question
Have to think
is,
about it.
how do we calculate the pricing using marginal cost pricing or to calculate the price, the charge?
I mean, so this would be, the ISO would be pricing to clear the current market.
Would bid on it.
Yeah.
Purchasing. The second level there,
Yeah, I mean, this is, it's not utility. I don't know if you're thinking of like utility pricing where you have a marginal cost and then you have an institutional or overhead. You're not thinking of that pricing model.
Like a decrease marginal social cost pricing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what you would get to. I would have to think about how that would deviate from what the ISO would do. Like what are the market clearing prices, that pricing. I think that's more of a utility, which we don't want, like rate of return regulation pricing here, because that doesn't vary. We want wholesale market pricing like the ISO does. Where supply and demand are equilibrated in real time.
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, so sorry for monopolizing.
That's okay, yeah.
But this presentation was amazing, and I think that
Thank you.
yeah, I've been thinking a lot about some of these things, and I'm sure you have also.
Well, no, we
So-
want to do some more.
Thank you. So this is amazing. My only concern is like how do we respond to accidents? Because when there's an accident, this whole system is broken, right?
Well, so that is another thing where I think people are used to the current road system. If you think about this as you drive along, you may conclude that there's tremendous underinvestment in road operation and maintenance under the current system where there is no marginal price, right? It's a tremendous, and I've seen 100 times where there'll be a fender bender, not fatal, right? But some accident in one lane, and it slows down 3 lanes of the Washington DC Beltway for 45 minutes. So if you add up the cost of every driver who is delayed for 45 minutes because of that little accident where one lane, nobody's injured, you come up with a grossly inefficient system. Where if you think about it, as soon as the accident occurs, and I heard about some countries that do this, they'll have like a tow truck ready. Maybe they won't be police officers with guns, but they'll have officials who would go out and quickly move the accident off the side of the road to get the traffic flowing. I see people, officials like standing around talking when they should be moving the accident. And I think you would get to that better in this world, right? And you would say, damn, we've monetized the value of all this waiting. And we can't tolerate this. Get that accident out of the way, get the free flow going. You know, have people waving it through whatever it is.
I'm sure that if it's privately operated, it will work way better.
Well, there's country like Australia has hundreds of private road operation contracts. So I want to study those a little bit more, but I think they're pretty good. So it's, well, and we can talk about, they get performance payments called availability payments to keep the operation available, keep the roads open. And I think with this system, you would get a lot more of that sort of incentive. The waste, if you think about it too much, will drive you nuts. Because there's a little accident here, you know, and everybody slows down and it's taking up a lane, but it causes like 30 minutes and miles of backup. It's very inefficient. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question in terms of like looking at the like public people to this problem when you price this all of the roads, right?
Public,
So
okay.
it's like so when you if you ask the no people outside, first question they're gonna ask where does the money go, right? And the second question, so I mean some people when you price the road, so it's still some people have to take the road because they don't have other choices. For example, if somebody's taking 91 freeway every day, if you change the price anyways, he has to take the highways, right? Because he doesn't have the other transportation modes available efficiently for him, right? And also another question that so basically this you creating this economic trade-off, and some people pay, but this money should go back to the people, you know, because for example, you increase the price on the road. I cannot take the road anymore.
Right.
I sacrifice my convenience, and somebody else paying for that basically is buying my spot, the space that the space of the road that I could use, but now I cannot. So basically, I have to earn some kind of money from that, right? Because I indirectly sold my spot to that person, right? And so I'm wondering how this money can come back to the people, because
So I don't know, people here, the engineering faculty know Kara Kokelman at UT Austin. You probably know her. So I was going to write it up, but it's just called credit-based congestion pricing. And Kara has a section of her website that is entirely dedicated to that question. So credit-based is the idea that basically economists would say that the wealth effect of this, you're changing prices, right? You're going from zero to a positive price. We're going to take out the wealth effect. In other words, we're going to get the average driver will have no change in their income. If you use the roads more than average, you pay average. If you use the roads less than average, you save money in your credit account. And so her system, which she's worked out in this series of papers, would get you to that zero wealth effect result for the average driver. Right. So then there's a whole literature now on what you would do with the revenue. There's other things that people say, like, and many economists say the current system of taxation for a lot of these jurisdictions is distortionary. Like if whatever it is, if it's sales taxes or whatever, it distorts consumer decisions. Eliminate those taxes, cut those back, because now you have revenue from the road. Now doing that politically is a different issue, but that would be the policy recommendation. So those would be two. And I think it's worth thinking more about how Kara's credit-based congestion pricing would work in a complete real-time network-wide priced system. So that I would just, defer to her because she's done a lot more thinking than I have on the wealth effect question.
You could also, just do a dividend, right?
Yeah,
Take money. And
it's just a credit, right? But she has this idea of accounts. Well,
yeah, but
accounts are built in here.
that's
Yeah.
maybe overcomplicating it. You could just send the
Send
the
it
money
back.
back. Yeah.
Yeah, so then the revenue just goes back to the driver, right? Yeah, I'd have to read her papers again as to why she doesn't suggest that, which would seem to be real simple. But maybe if you have a monthly service provider account for your roads, then the credit-based is just as easy, right? Yeah, I'm happy if people just accept the notion that it's worth exploring. Then that's to me, it's what you do with the revenue is a separate issue to some extent. Politically, it's super important, right? But the economics and policy, I like to separate those two things. But politically, I think it's really important how you think about using the revenue to get the drivers to accept this.
You know Mike Manville?
I do know, he used to be at Cornell.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I guess when I was there. So he has some interesting studies about the political issues associated with the revenue, right?
Yeah,
Even in California, I think his idea that he talked to both kind of county and city officials about what they would do with the revenue if Caltrans collected it. And apparently they all told him, like, we don't trust the state to actually give us the money if they collect it.
wow.
We don't
Wow.
actually see the money. It would
Yeah.
go into the general fund.
Levels of mistrust are
Yeah, exactly.
pretty high. Yeah. By the way, I don't expect this to occur first in the United States. Like I just don't, there's a whole legacy infrastructure. The infrastructure ownership is balkanized. I mean, I think it would be Middle East, Asia, maybe parts of Africa where they would do these experiments first.
Yeah.
Anyway, just to be clear, I'm not optimistic about the LA metro area doing this anytime soon.
I mean, here, I think cordons work pretty well in some locations, but it won't, what would you cordon in LA that would make sense? You kind of do need the network-wide pricing, I think, to.
Oh, yeah, I'm in favor of that.
I mean, it's kind of important, but money is important. Like, I mean, imagine like somebody's in the fastest lane and cutting in the 1 mile, cutting the 7 lanes just get to the exit. So, I mean, probably causes some delays in the people's like behind, right? Imagine like 5 seconds per vehicle for other people's in behind. So if it adds up, like maybe it would be like 30 minutes because of all the shockwave effect. So if you times to that times to the like pricing, so you basically 1% costs a lot of money for the other people. Or for example, somebody was speeding and like made an accident on the road, closed the 1 lane, 20-30% more travel time on the road. So should he pay for the other people's price, or who is responsible for that, right?
Are you saying there would be congestion or?
Yeah, what if there is but because congestion usually happens because of the other people's fault, right? Maybe somebody caused the accident. I mean, intentionally or unintentionally, but like he was on fault, or maybe that's like crossing some lane, cutting people's lane, speeding, or these kind of things. So would he be responsible for?
Well, I think hopefully my answer to this, the guy was sitting here is, I think we're used to a road network where the operation and management is not in line with the value. And that if the more were invested in expert operation and management of the road network, you would get a lot fewer of those sorts of problems. If you're talking about price spikes, then you're worried about that, and you have a forward market to help smooth that out. And hopefully you would have quick responses, so the market could respond quickly and say, get off at this exit. Don't keep going because there's an accident ahead. Get off at this exit. The other thing that people don't pay attention to is that every car has a reverse gear. And if the vehicles, if it were managed properly, could manage the vehicles getting out of the traffic congestion and getting off at other exits more quickly to reduce, you're not going to mitigate it to zero, because as long as there's human drivers, there's still going to be car accidents and crazy things and drunk people and tired people and everything else. But you can mitigate those effects with this system. Part of my problem as an economist is that the investment in road operation management is not in line with the value that people have, the true value of it. And pricing would put a value on it, I think. Anyway.
I think we're almost 2 hours.
All right.
Let's thank. I thought that was great. I think.
Yeah, thanks.